All right, welcome back in. This has become a nice little fun segment, I guess we should say, a little off script with Rip. We've had a lot of players, a lot of great personalities, and one that we've constantly heard the ask for is one of the best personalities in Birdland, my friend Ben McDonald. And Ben, how we doing?
I'm doing good. How about you? Glad to be here.
I know. We've been working on this for a while.
We've been kind of going back and forth and schedules trying to meet up and all that kind of stuff, but glad to finally be here.
Yeah, you actually got the hectic schedule because for you, not only were you obviously broadcasting for MASN, cover college baseball, SEC, College World Series.
Right.
Now it's getting down the home stretch. We'll get into all that. Do you ever get stressed out with the schedule? Is it because you're used to the whole baseball lifestyle?
It's different. It's stressful. Honestly, the first half of the season for me is a little more challenging because there's the college baseball piece of it, and just when I'm really getting up on the Orioles and been here a lot and kind of know all the storylines, and I got to kind of pivot and go do a month of the college game, which is, the regionals, the super regionals, College World Series. And so then I kind of catch back up on the college game, and then you lose what you knew about the Orioles. So you got to kind of relearn it. But once we get to the second half of the season, I'm good to go then because I saw Oriole baseball at that point.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing with the Orioles, it's a long season, longer than college. 162 for baseball, that hasn't changed. Let's talk about then your journey to how you got here. Let's take a step back. I know this, but for people that don't know, you were a first overall pick for the Baltimore Orioles. Walk us through, and you're a good old Louisiana boy. Go Tigers. I know some people, there's some Tigers around. We talked to Jonathan Papelbon the other day. He says he can put up with you even though you're an LSU guy. Yeah, but talk about your journey of how you got to in your professional career in baseball.
Well, I mean, I was drafted out of high school by the Braves, but I wanted the college experience. I wanted to go to LSU. I grew up and still live 20 minutes from the university. So that was all. Although I visited the University of Texas, I visited Mississippi State. At the time, State had the baseball team with Will Clark and Palomero and Thigpen and Brantley and a bunch of guys. And so I did take a visit to go see Ron Polk over there. But at the end of the day, some guy by the name of Berkman came to LSU when I was in high school. And I was like, this guy might be okay. And he ended up being arguably the greatest college coach of all time. But, yeah, that's kind of where it started. I went to LSU on a basketball scholarship. Not many people know that, but I was much more highly recruited out of high school to play basketball than baseball. Basketball was my first love. I loved the game of basketball. I was probably one of those ADD kids before there was such a diagnosis. Like, I like to get up and down the court. That's what I wanted to do. Now, I went to LSU to do both. Obviously, being drafted out of high school, I had some potential in baseball, but most people thought my future was going to be basketball. But then I ended up getting over to LSU, and by my sophomore year, the fastball ticked up, and I was, throwing much harder than most, mid-90s and higher as a sophomore, and had that Olympic experience in 88. I won a gold medal in the Olympics in 88, and that's what kind of separated me. And if I knew that I was, going back to college at LSU, that I could be the first pick. And I think the Orioles in 88 lost the first, 20 or 21 games it was. And that's how they got the first pick. And that's how I ended up in Baltimore.
Yeah, it's a wild thing. A few things I want to just circle back on. One, the experience that you were a basketball player. And we're talking about in this day and age of being multi-sport athletes for a lot of people. So for those that are listening out there, play as many sports as you can because you never know what you could be the best at. What were you playing basketball? What was the position? Because are you standing up? I'm standing up straight for no reason. But for you, what were you? 6'7"?
6'7". I ended up getting 6'7". I grew an inch once I got to LSU. I actually went to LSU to play outside on the wing, like the number three spot. Yeah. But then when I got there, our power forward had great issues, and then our other big guy blew his knee out in the preseason. So I got shoved down low at 6'6" at the time, 185 pounds, guarding people like Will Perdue at Vanderbilt, a 7-footer, and some big guys. And so I was kind of out of my element in some ways, but that's what Dale Brown needed me to do. And I actually started because of the injuries and some guys out on academic probation. I actually started the first 7 games of the year as a true freshman, which was a great experience for me. But I quickly realized that the boys could dribble the ball up the court faster than I could run. And when the fastball kind of ticked up a little bit, I kind of knew baseball was probably going to be my ticket to go on and play at the next level.
And I think it turned out well. You were the number 1 overall pick, which we mentioned. And that Orioles team, 21 straight losses to start that year. And actually, after the first 6, my grandfather, Cal Sr., was then fired from the team.
That's right.
Frank Robinson took over as the manager. Orioles lost the next 15 games in a row.
That's right.
So maybe there was just a few other problems there besides just with Senior being the manager. And that's baseball, but it led you there. And I remember the excitement around I remember talking to my dad. I wasn't born yet, but the excitement when you were drafted and the Orioles were trying to get back to relevancy. But also the other part where it's not everyone talks about, but you've mentioned this because of Jackson Holiday, but just because you're the number 1 overall pick, there's a lot of talent, but a lot of expectation.
Yes.
What was the hardest thing for you when you were beginning your pro career and then trying to establish yourself in the big leagues?
The mistake that I made, and I think it's pretty common for a lot of high prospects or high draft picks, is trying to live up to expectations.
Yeah.
That's what really set me back in some ways, because I had never failed on a basketball court or really on a baseball field in my life. I had, a lot of talent, worked hard like a lot of people do. And then all of a sudden you get to the big leagues, and I was thrown into a situation where I didn't know how to pitch. Like, my college coach called every pitch I ever threw at LSU. I never thought about why I was throwing one guy a breaking ball, why I was throwing this guy a changeup, why I was elevating a fastball. He just put down a finger in a spot, and I can do that. I got one of those. Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden you go from college at 21 and you get drafted in June, and you're in the big league September the 1st with 2 minor league starts. And now you got to call your own game. And success did not come for me right away, and there were a lot of nights I went home, man, and bumped my head up against a wall just trying to figure this thing out. And I remember my agent at the time, Scott Bohr, saying, listen, it's going to take you about 200 innings in the big leagues before that light bulb starts to flicker a little bit, because you've never called your own game at the big league level. And so there was a lot of ups and downs for me, a lot of frustrating times for me in my career. And I mean, your dad, Junior actually helped speed up my process, and the story.
I do know the story, but you should tell it.
It's kind of a funny story where me and Chris Hoyles was a young catcher.
Yep.
I was a young pitcher. We're trying to figure this thing out at the highest level you can figure it out. I remember Junior sticking his head in there. Me and Chris were having a couple beers after the game, just beating our head up against the wall, going, golly, are we ever going to get this right? And he sticks his head in there and he goes, you boys don't have a clue of what you're doing, do you? That was his exact word. I went, no, sir, Mr. Ripken. And I said, I got no clue at all of what's going on. And he said, he comes and sits down, he pops open a beer like he does, and he goes, would you like some help? I said, is a school bus yellow? Of course I'd like some help. And so he said, here's what we're going to do. He said, we're going to have this triangle, me, Hoyles, and you. And this triangle, it's going to stay right here. I'm going to start calling all your pitches you throw. And I went, are you going to play catcher? And he goes, no, I'm going to call them from shortstop. I was like, how is this going to happen? He said, don't you worry about it. I'll take care of that. He said, then we're going to sit down after every game, and we're going to have a couple beers, and we're going to figure this thing out. I said, I'm all in. So all of a sudden, it's so funny. I'm looking in at home plate, getting the signs from Chris Hoyle, and I could see his eyes are looking over my right shoulder where Junior's standing out at shortstop, and the way he held his glove and where he would actually touch, because nobody looks at the shortstop when the ball's coming back to the pitcher. So Hoyle throws it back, and he could be focusing on Rip, and he's getting the sign and location. And then we would sit down after every game over a few beers and say, okay, this is why I wanted to pitch Dave Winfield like this in this situation. This is what Paul Molitor likes to do. This is what some of the best Wade Boggs likes to do. And this is why you pitch him like this in this situation. And those are things I never thought of. Like, Junior taught me that you can pitch to a hitter's strength every now and then. In other words, if you're up 5-1 and it's the 6th inning and you got 2 out and nobody on, let's give Paul Molitor what he wants to hit. Yeah. Let's make him think that's how we're going to get him out when it matters. I said, man, I never thought about that. I thought you always went to the well. He goes, no, you don't stay in the well with big league hitters because they will make adjustments quickly and they'll get you. So he was the first guy that taught me, hey, let's pitch to his strength in this situation. But when we got to tie and run out at second base and that run can beat you out there, this is how we're going to get him out. I never thought about that. And so this went on for a full year. Like 33 starts, he called every pitch I threw the entire year, and we sat down and we talked about it. And then at the end of the year, he came to me and Hoyles and he goes, you guys are good now. I'm sitting back here behind you. You need me, you call me in, but I'm going to let you guys run with it. And he would always come in with some suggestions because Junior was not only so talented, as you know, but he was a student of the game. Like he knew, it used to drive me batty no matter who would ground out the shortstop, whether it was Kenny Lofton or a Cecil fielder, but he would beat the guy by a step over at first base. He would just a half step, he'd beat the guy, but he knew how fast everybody was and the positions he could play. And there would be so many balls I would throw, and I would turn around and go, damn it, that's in the hole. And I turn around and look, and there he is right there throwing the guy out at first base. And I'm going, how could you be playing so-and-so right there? He said, you just keep throwing the ball to the spot that you're supposed to throw it to, and I'm going to be in the right spot.
It's funny for the talent part. I actually told my dad this when it came to Gunner now playing shortstop. And I go, Dad, no offense. I said, Gunner might have you beat on some athletic fields. Like, he is fast. Yes. He is big. He is strong. You were too. You weren't that fast. I said, but the thing that always separated him was being a student.
Yes.
And he knew where to be at every single time. He knew how much time he had to make the play. He knew what he was going to do before it happened. And that's why he was so good at playing the game of baseball. He was beyond prepared for every moment.
Yes.
And that's why the consistency drove in almost to a fault growing up, Ben. I feel bad. Well, it helped you for your career, so I don't feel bad for you on that because that's the awesome part. But me growing up, and we're sitting at the table, he goes, hey, Rye, come here. And he'd always call me Big. Big Man was my nickname growing up. He'd be like, hey, Big, let's watch this. And I go, I'm 12. You know, I go, he goes, you see this, team's up 2 runs or whatever here, and a ball's hit to the outfield. Talking about cutoff positions and when to cut it off here, where the scenario is here, where the shortstop should be when the ball's thrown there. And I'm like, okay, great. But it happens so much and over again. But I wouldn't trade that away. I learned so much from that.
Yes.
And that helped me get to where I needed to go. And even now being outside the game, and I'm sure even for you, it helped you open your eyes to just how the game of baseball is. Because I'll toot your horn here. I think you're one of the best out there when it comes to calling or color guys in baseball.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
And but I think you've become so well at understanding the process of it. So
it benefited me. I mean, and your grandfather, Senior, I think that's where Junior gets a lot of that from too. Mm-hmm. Senior was the same way. Senior took a liking to me for whatever, and your dad did too for whatever. I think they saw a lot of similarities. Small town guy, high draft picks, guys that are supposed to have expectations that have to deal with it, and so. It was a blessing for me to have Senior and Junior. And you're right. I mean, I learned so much. I used to do some camps way back when, probably before you even born. We would do Billy and Junior would do some camps in Aberdeen, and I would go work out. But I would just be like a sponge, listening to them talk about middle infielders and the footwork and the pivots and all those kinds of things. Just stuff you pick up on. And when you know the game like they know the game, it's important. I mean, you got to be talented to get to this level, but it never hurts to know the game and know the speed of the game and know what you're going to do there. Because it's like 2 + 2. Once you figure out what 2 + 2 is, it's always 4. Once you talk about cutoffs and relays, once you learn that, your body just naturally knows it, and it goes to these certain situations.
It really is. It's continued. There's the muscle memory, but then the constant reps, the mental reps over and over and over. And it can be redundant. It can be a pain in the ass. But you do it right.
Yeah.
It's going to help you out. Before I ask you about some other things, which is kind of related to baseball, sort of, but I want to finish with talking about Jackson, because the reason why I brought up with you being 1-1, and I've heard you talk about it with him, with the expectations he has to deal with. And you mentioned something, you never really failed yourself when you were getting up through the ranks or in college, high school. I think that people forget that Jackson was on a similar path to that. He never really failed.
Never.
Until facing the highest competition at 20 years old. Can you just touch on that? Because I think that learning how to fail ultimately is the last piece for even the most talented players out there.
100%, and look, the first time you get punched in the mouth, it's tough. Like, I mean, you talk about Jackson Holiday, a kid that had so much success in high school, hit 600. He blew through every minor league system at a young age, much younger than anybody else when he was playing against those guys, and just had all kinds of success and blew through it. Then all of a sudden you get to the big leagues like I did, and you get punched for the first time. And it sets you on your heels because you don't know. You've never failed before. You don't know how to respond to that. And it set me on my heels. And I could tell Jackson, and listen, Jackson had a lot of attention, obviously, and I did too. He came up I felt so bad for him because I was almost reliving 1989 in a lot of ways when Jackson came up, because there was 30 or 40 media members. It took him out of his routine. You could tell he's a great kid. He's a nice kid, but he he was like I was. I didn't want to talk to those guys. I understood they had a job, but like I just wanted to play baseball. I wanted to do my job. I wanted to learn. Jackson is, I think, a lot in the same way that I was. But he went ahead and he did all the interviews, but it took him out of his game a little bit. And then he got off to a rough start, as we know, and you could tell the body language was a little bit differently. And he goes down, and what I love about Jackson, they gave him 2 or 3 things, and you've touched on them because I watch your show. They cut the leg kick down a little bit, flatten the swing a little bit, wanted to be more on time with the fastball, because at the end, when he got sent down the first time, they were just kind of beating him with heaters right down the gut, because they had slowed the bat down a lot before that. And then he really went down and worked on some things to get better. And he came back up, and I could tell instantly when he stepped back the second time, in Mayo in some ways too, I'm seeing that the body language a little bit different. Okay, I've been here once before. I don't know everything, but I'm a little bit more comfortable with my situation. And as you know, for young players, success right away really helps. And of course, Jackson hits the granny, first game back.
It's the relief.
That is right, a chance to breathe for a second.
Right.
And he's been playing really well since then. Now, one thing I'll say about Jackson, and what I love about a young player, is his ability to separate the two, offense and defense. And even though he struggled the first time up, I still think the defense was pretty good, like above average defense for a guy learning a new position.
I agree.
I think he was able to separate, and that's really hard for young players to do. And he's playing a premium second base right now too.
Yeah, and that's the part, and people do forget, with all being young on the hitting side, fielding wise, he was drafted as a shortstop.
Sure.
The minor league wants him to get reps across the infield, specifically up the middle for him, but he wasn't a second baseman traditionally.
Right.
So he's learning as he goes, just like he's being a hitter. And I'm glad you mentioned, not to give you some, bring you back some anxiety from when you got brought up, but you understood that the stress, that when you're stressed as a hitter, and I noticed with Jackson too, he's pulling his head off of everything. Yep. You could tell he wasn't relaxed. And the other part, I bet, Ben, a lot of people told you how good you were when you were coming up. You're so talented. You're going to be this. And it's nice to get those compliments, right?
Sure.
It's awesome. But sometimes when people tell you how great you are, sometimes you need a reminder that you can always be better, being humbled. I remember even with Grayson Rodriguez, I love Grayson. He's got so much potential, and you can see when he's on, man.
Yeah.
But I remember when Grayson was coming up, everyone was telling him, you're going to be just like Mike Mussina. You're going to just be that next guy. And rightfully so, he should think that. But then he got hit, and it was the humble going like, man, I'm not as good as I think I am. I can be.
Right.
But I got to do some work. Jackson came up. He seems fine. I think the same thing. Learn to fail, get comfortable. And now they're proving themselves they can do it. Yeah. That's the last thing. It's like, hey, I believe in the hype. I know what I'm capable of, but I want to see the results.
Yeah.
They got to see it. You got to see it. And it was great. Now for the other not baseball part, I wanted to finish the other side. Oh, you mentioned before this, and I knew this story, and I've been dying to hear this from you. Not many people are going to have in their contracts that they can't wrestle gators. And I have to ask you about this. Well, you got to be. No one else has to have that. So that's talking about the Louisiana roots right there. I remember my dad's told me some stories with it. But why, Ben, did you have to get a contract that said you couldn't do that?
Well, when the Orioles found out that I used to mess around with gators, obviously there's a little bit of a risk that goes.
So what does that mean? What would you mean mess around with gators?
From the time I was probably in junior high through high school and into college, me and my buddies, my best friends, used to get on regular just bass boats or bateau boats. We used to do a lot of duck hunting down the river. And at nighttime, gators come out. And mostly it was after a few adult beverages. We'd go out and go, hey, let's go catch some alligators. So at nighttime, when you shine a big Q-beam light along the riverbanks, the alligators come out at night and they're feeding at night because they're mostly a nocturnal animal. You can see their eyes just glow ruby red, like it's just red. That's an alligator. So you just kind of sneak up on them. One guy's driving a boat. One guy's holding the light. One guy's on the bow of the boat. He's going to be the jumper that jumps onto the alligator. And you just kind of cruise up on top of them. Now, we did have a little bit of sense. If it was a huge gator, obviously we didn't jump on a big one. And the way you can tell is if the alligator's eyes are far apart, that's a big gator. Like if you see one like that, you better turn the boat around and go somewhere else because that's a big one. Now you see the eyes closer together. That's a smaller alligator. That's the one you want to try to catch. So it became a game to us to see how many alligators we could physically catch in a night. And so we would actually get on the bow of the boat, and the gators stay in shallow water at nighttime, and we would jump off the bow of the boat and try to just straddle them and catch them right behind the head and pick them up and put them in the boat. That's how that all began. And I can remember nights, I got pictures of us catching 7 or 8 alligators in a night, you know, and just jumping off the boat. And so when the Orioles found out about that, they were like, okay, Ben, listen, you can't do this anymore. Because and my buddy did get bit accidentally one time. He did take Michael took 60 something stitches one night. We had to rush him to the hospital. Missed the gator, and the gator just would take off. Anyway, it bit him. And so we had to take him to the.
Was that the only accident of all this?
That was the only bad accident that was on purpose. Now, I had a buddy.
Oh my goodness.
Kind of get a guy, another buddy caught a very small one. He's like, that's so small, I wouldn't even have jumped off the boat on that one. And he got him and he stuck him on his arm. The gator just bit him on the arm like that. He was holding the alligator out. Like, see, that's a baby one right there. And he just pulled him off. But that was the only bad injury that we had doing that, you know. Now, one of the stories you're talking about, I hooked a gator in spring training. I used to go bass fishing in the ponds all the time in spring training because I like to hunt and fish and all that kind of stuff. And so I had a gator bite a topwater lure one time, and it's like, what am I going to do with this thing? So he was like a 4-footer. So I reeled him in, and I thought, okay, this would be pretty cool if I could take this gator and bring it in the clubhouse tomorrow morning. So I grabbed the gator, and I had some athletic tape, and I taped his mouth shut. Of course, he could still breathe and everything. I didn't hurt him. And I just stuck him in my bathtub overnight in the hotel and closed the curtain and just left him there. And I'd go run water on him every now and then. So he didn't.
Did you have a roommate?
No, not at that time.
Okay. All right. Continue.
So I did that. And so the next morning I had this big duffel bag. It was an Oriole duffel bag. And I just slipped the gator in there, zipped it up, and just went into the clubhouse like I was just bringing some gear into the clubhouse. And so I set the gator by my locker, and the mouth's still taped up now. I got a little bit of sense. And so I unzipped it, and I just walked away. And this thing eventually, of course, saw the daylight, and he comes out, and he's running in Sarasota at Twin Lakes. He's running through the clubhouse. Guys are out in the parking lot half naked screaming. Other guys are up on top of their locker just screaming and hollering. This kid's running around the clubhouse. Well, Roland Heeman, who was the GM at the time, of course, he heard about it. Wildlife and Fisheries showed up.
I wonder how he heard about it.
Yeah, Wildlife. Can you imagine if we had social media then?
I can't.
So I got in trouble for that one. And of course, I took the gator and I went, where the ponds are in front of Twin Lakes.
Oh, absolutely.
I went and put the gator back in there way before Wildlife and Fisheries showed up. I let him go that morning, but of course, they all came down, and Roland calls me, and the GM says, Ben, listen, you just can't do that. You just can't do that anymore.
Did he know you wrestled gators before or after you brought a live gator into the clubhouse?
Before he knew, because it was already in the contract.
Oh, so it was already in the contract. So you're just like, hey, I can't wrestle
physically jump on them, but I caught this one with a lure, a fishing rod,
Yeah,
so
okay, I got you.
It was a gray area in the contract, wink, wink, so technically I was okay.
You know what I loved also is you were telling me about with the gator's eyes, which again I didn't know, but I like how you're preparing as if I'm going to go jump off a damn boat and try to catch one of those.
I've invited Kevin Brown to go gator hunting several times. He just doesn't know he's going to be the bait when we go.
Oh well,
I'm going to tie a rope around him out to his waist and throw him out and get him to swim back to the boat. We'll get the gators coming, So.
Oh, poor Kevin. Yeah, I don't know if I don't know if Kevin will come back. That's one that I'd be.
Not only is he not going to come back, he's not ever going to go because he knows better.
He knows better. He knows exactly. Yeah, maybe you can convince Jeff Arnold. Jeff might be adventurous. Jeff might be
a little bit more for the gator to eat.
Well, even though you scare the absolute shit out of him when it comes to everything else.
Jeff is the most high-strung person I've ever seen in my life, and I can't stand myself to get him because he works really hard like we always do. He does a lot of homework like I do, but he waits to get to the ballpark to do his homework. I'm kind of doing mine in the morning over a cup of coffee, most of mine. So when he gets to the ballpark, he's got his headphones on, man, and he's just like locked in. Like he's just locked in. The bombs could be going off. He wouldn't know. So every now and then I like to sneak in there and mess with him a little bit. I call him Doc is what I call him because I didn't even really know him that well during COVID, his first year here. And I had gotten some stitches in my back. I forgot I cut my back or something. I had stitches. And during COVID, we weren't allowed to go down to the training room. It was time. The doctor called me in Baton Rouge and goes, listen, Ben, you got to get these stitches out of your back. It's been 2 weeks. I was like, I can't reach them. He said, well, you got to get somebody to take them out. So I found Jeff Arnold, and I gave him the tweezers and a little shot. I said, you got to take these stitches out of my back. So about an hour before the game, I take my shirt off. He's taking stitches out of my back. That's how he got the nickname Doc.
Wait, okay. So
he's like, I've never done this before. I said, well, I can't reach them, so you got to take the stitches out.
And that's where the trust really began.
Yeah,
with you and Jeff Arnold.
And now I'm going to be the best man in his wedding coming up.
I saw that,
this
which is
offseason.
amazing.
So we've gone from Doc to stitches to scaring the hell out of him to being his best man in the wedding. So.
Hey, that's how it goes, right?
That's right, it is.
And Jeff Arnold was radio for Frederick Keys when I was there in High A.
That's right.
That's where we first met.
That's right.
Jeff's an awesome dude. I do laugh every time I see your videos. Because
he's such a great broadcaster. And of course, he was a Maryland broadcaster of the year last year, and so he's doing a really, really good job.
Yeah, I mean, he's as genuine as he come, but man, you scared the hell out of him. How'd you get that scar in the back? Gator hunting?
I was trying to remember how I got it, and my wife Nikki's here. I don't know. It could have been. I've had 2 bouts with melanoma. One on my nose, where you see a scar right here, and I had stitches there. And then have to have treatment for either one of them. And I think that might have been one on my back where they cut out, margin. They cut it out, but they got to stitch it up or whatever. So I've been fortunate in that way that none of them has been very serious.
Yeah, I still can't. Out of all this, I can't believe that you hadn't. Of all the crazy crap that you've done, it hasn't been from the crazy crap that you've been banged up. That's the wild thing. It's from either actually playing when you had shoulder injuries, or it was with not Gator-related issues.
It wasn't from being smart, I can tell you that. I was fortunate. I was lucky. You
are a treasure, Ben. Don't ever change. Last thing before I let you get 2 things before I let you get out of here. The Orioles right now are coming down the stretch.
Yeah.
We don't need to get into the inner workings of how things go because it's a long season. 162, anything can happen. Even though the Orioles are so depleted, I tell people most teams with this many injuries probably aren't even in the fold. They would have fallen off a long time ago. The O's are going to have a legit shot. If they can get some guys healthy and get right at the right time, there's no reason why they can't make a run in this postseason.
I totally agree. I mean, we were doing an interview the other day, and they said, what's the most striking thing? What are you going to remember about this year for the Orioles? I said, it's the injuries and how they've overcome them. Because you're right. I mean, it would have been so easy on a lot of different occasions to say, okay, we've had 4/5 of our rotation at one point on the IL. We've lost our all-star third base. We've lost our difference maker, Mateo. We've lost this guy, that guy. They kind of fold in the towel and say, it's just one of those years. It wasn't meant to be. 2024 was not meant to be our year. But I think Brendan Hyde's had the pulse of this team from the beginning. There's never, and that's what I love about this bunch, this core group of Henderson and Westberg, and you talk about Rutschman. Talk about Santander that's been here forever, Colton Cowser, these dudes, and you know a lot of them. I mean, they just ain't got no quit in them, man. No. They don't make excuses. I'm not going to say they don't feel sorry about what's happening from time to time, but it's almost like, okay, this happened, but what are we going to do? We got 2 choices, right? We can either pick up the pieces and move on and continue to fight our asses off, or we can just say, we're done. It wasn't supposed to be. And this team ain't got quit in them at all. Yeah. And so that's what I've remembered about them is they've been able to overcome a lot of things this year, and at times, obviously, they've not played well, but injuries have been a big part of it. But the good news is nobody's really run off and hit at all this year, know? And so I'm with you. I think if Burnsy gets right, because you got to have that real number one, and I was encouraged by his last start. Eflin, to me, is as good as anybody and arguably the best pickup during the trade deadline.
He's last year's Jordan Montgomery, but even better right now.
And you're right. If you get Grayson Rodriguez back, nobody wants to play the Orioles in the playoffs. You get those 3 guys, you can run out there. This offense, gets a little bit hotter, and they've been showing signs. I know last night was a little bit of a rough night, but overall, I'm encouraged by the way they're swinging the bat. I think Westberg's a big piece of this. Huge. Everybody thought I was crazy when I said when he went down. I said, Westberg is the glue to this team because he's what I call the silent assassin. He just sits back in the middle to the back part of that lineup, and everybody should worry about Henderson, and they should worry about Rutschman, and they should worry about Santander. But I think he gets overlooked a lot, and he just sits back there and wears you out. And he's a guy that grinds you, and turns the lineup over and gets it to the back end back there. And so you get that dude back, man. And we talked about this. The Rangers and the D-backs are the perfect example. I remember the Rangers had a 3-game lead with like 10 to play last year in their division, and they went south in a hurry. They ended up making it as a wild card. Right. Then they got to go on the road, and they've been a below 500 team on the road. And everybody said, well, they made the playoffs, but they got no shot because they got to go on the road. Where they sweep Tampa, they come in here, they sweep the Orioles. they're going to win the World Series. And, of course, the D-backs were a wild card team, too, and nobody gave them a shot, and all they did was make it to the World Series. And so I'm with you on that. I think what we thought we knew about baseball last year with all three teams won over 100 or more games, the Dodgers and the Orioles and the Braves, they won one playoff game combined. You just don't know anymore. It almost feels like, as a basketball analogy, it almost feels like March Madness now in some ways. And so we'll see what happens. Just got to get there and get hot, and then I think the Orioles have a chance.
You just got to get there. That's the biggest part. Get there, see what happens, and all will work out. Now, the final thing, and I'll let you get out of here. How's your putting game?
Putting game?
Yeah.
It's probably not real strong. I used to play a lot of golf, and then I got into this commentating thing, and I didn't have time for golf anymore.
Well, guess what? Well, here's the thing.
So
with our friend with the gridiron golf over here, you see this? We're going to get a couple balls out here. It's football style golf. Okay. So what's going to happen is you readjusting the camera, Brad?
Yeah, we're good.
So what's going to happen here? Gridiron Golf's been proud sponsor with us now.
I see.
You're going to have a chance. You get 4 putts.
All right.
You're able to make one of your 4 putts for a touchdown. You make it on the first one, they're going to give a game away to one of our followers here. If you get a field goal at some point or any points, they'll win some prizes as well. But you got 4 shots at it.
And I can shoot it either one I want to shoot at?
Well, if you want the touchdown one, the one in the middle is going to get the big thing.
Same size, so
No, they're not.
I'll go for the touchdown.
Yeah, they're not all the same size. You're going to find that out real quick.
Okay, this is bigger. Okay.
Well, that's why it's a PAT. It's just an extra point, 2-point conversion. Yeah.
We're going to gamble.
Yeah, you're in it to win it here. Yeah. It's not one size fits all, unfortunately. Oh, just like that. Just like that. Touchdown. And that you just won us. You just won one of our subscribers and followers a gridiron golf game. Perfect. Just like that. Perfect. Unbelievable.
All right, one try. That's all we needed was one try.
That's it. Damn, you don't even need the other 3 balls. This is all right. I think that's a wrap. I think we're done. Well, Ben, appreciate you, man. We'll go back so they can hear you one more time. But
always good to be with y'all. I'm a big fan of yours and what y'all do around here. Y'all got one of the best shows in the Baltimore area for sure. So I enjoy being with you guys.
I appreciate you, Ben. Enjoy the rest of your time, and I'll be bothering you soon. All right.
I'll be around. Enjoyed it.